Today I'm joined by Vera Stewart, a returning guest and celebrated Southern cook, and the creative force behind a beloved culinary legacy built on hospitality, family, and joy. In today's conversation, we're stepping into the culture and rhythm of Masters Week in Augusta, a time that carries its own visual language, traditions, and approach to gathering. Vera shares what makes this week so distinctive, from the etiquette and atmosphere to how it shapes the way people host, entertain, and come together. We also talk about the role of food during Masters Week, what shows up on tables, what's traditional, and how entertaining shifts during this particular moment in Augusta's calendar. I also had the joy of asking her about her newest cookbook, Generations, the third in her series. She reflects on how the book builds on her earlier work, who she was writing for this time around, and how her approach to recipes continues to evolve through her cooking camps, family traditions, and decades of hosting. This is such a fun episode, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Grandma's Silver, where tradition meets today. I'm Allie, your host of the Grandma's Silver podcast and founder of the Grand Millennial Lifestyle. Here, we blend aesthetics with nostalgia, engaging in conversations with lifestyle brands, designers, and more to rediscover the timeless charm of the past. Join me as we journey from home to heart, illuminating the past and polishing the present with the gleam of Grandma's Silver. All right, well, Vera, welcome back to the pod. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Well, it's so fun when, we're talking about different things. And, I just appreciate the fact that you're always reaching out to see what's new with Vera.
Yes, and there is some new news. So that's going to be a big part of our conversation today, which I'm excited to talk with you about. But one of the first things I want to just also throw out here, we're saying all of this, you are a repeat guest. So just for folks who maybe didn't hear your first episode, we talked a lot about football season and tailgating. And while that's not maybe what's on our minds right now, I encourage people to go back and listen. I will link to that episode in the show notes. So I want to give you an opportunity first to kind of reintroduce yourself. And then let's talk about the Masters. And maybe if you would like to tell people why I wanted to speak with you about the Masters, why that makes sense.
Absolutely. It's just been a very short period of time, only 42 years that I've been doing this. And, I started as a home economics teacher with a degree in home economics education from the University of Georgia. And I taught school for 4 years. And when my first son, who's now 46, was born, I really wanted to stay at home. There weren't that many career choices back then where you could actually work from home. I love to cook. I love to entertain. I always had. And so kind of starting a cottage catering business was where my roots got planted. Mm-hmm. And 42 years later, I'm still doing the very first big catering jobs I ever did during the Masters Golf Tournament, here in Augusta. And there really wasn't much going on at the actual tournament that had to do with food. There was the traditional chicken salad sandwich or pimento cheese sandwich that everybody still loves. But in terms of really eating there, that wasn't an option. So our original client base, we would do their breakfast. They would go to the tournament for a little while. They would come back. We'd serve them lunch. They'd come back and we'd do dinner. And these are all in private homes in Augusta that rent, to businesses to entertain their clients and customers, during the tournament. The rest of my career kind of spawned off of, well, that's really great in the spring, but what are you doing in the summer? And what do you do the rest of the year? I really didn't want to be in the restaurant business with small children. And so I came up with the mail order division of my company. That went on for quite a while. And we were also sold in other outlets like Costco and Saks and Neiman Marcus that had food in their catalogs. Then my accountant said, well, you're just losing your shirt in the summer, and that's when I started my camp. And so the camp this summer will be 23 years old. Wow. And I kept it because I get to watch this entrepreneurial spirit come out of a child. And it's so refreshing. And, I just love that part of it. But to go back to the original question about the golf tournament here, When you think about entrepreneurship and when you think about career choices, generally speaking, you're in a niche. You're in your little town and, the local bride is getting married and you're going to do that. There may be a business that's building a new building and you're going to do the grand opening. But when you factor in that a town the size of Augusta, Georgia, because I mean, we're not Atlanta,
Mhm.
we're a medium-sized town in our state, host an event of that magnitude, I have been trained and taught and mentored by event planners from all over the world. The on-the-job training that I got that most people would have paid thousands of dollars to go to a conference to learn that sort of thing, I was able to do in real time. Needless to say, if I write a fourth book, it will be all the mistakes I've made because you can be assured that there was times that I got kind of fussed at because maybe something didn't go exactly right. But I've always taken the attitude you can either get mad or get better. And
Yeah.
I've chosen to get better. We actually have two clients during the tournament that we have had this coming tournament for 42 years.
Oh, how special is that?
Yeah,
And that's a
yeah. And
testament to
many of
your.
them for over 20. It's really something.
Have you always been in Augusta, or did you end up in Augusta because of
I
your?
ended up in Augusta. My first little catering experience started in Cartersville, Georgia. That's where both of my sons were born. And it just so happened in that little small window of time, a local Cartersville man became the governor of the state of Georgia. And I was like the local caterer. So all the parties that were held, I did. And I was so fond of Joe Frank Harris and his wife Elizabeth that when they did the inaugural events at the governor's mansion, they asked me to come oversee, one of the luncheons that was taking place. So that's was really a great experience. I was nervous, I have to admit. I was really nervous, but through nerves, you sometimes recognize that a challenge makes you better.
Yes.
So that was really something. But the rest of my career has been right here in Augusta.
Okay. Has golf always been something that you've cared for?
My husband and our three sons are all golfers.
Okay.
My husband is an amazing golfer. Sunday afternoons, generally speaking, are the golf tournament that's on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just something about it that I've always liked. And with most any sport, whether it's grit or determination or how, a bad shot affects their demeanor, all of those things go back into the business world as well, just like I described. I've, been fussed at many times. And, are you going to just get it together and move forward or are you going to let it take you down? Because I know something about golf, it helps in, well, what did y'all think of the shot on 16 today? At least you can have some conversation and have some intelligent interaction about the tournament. But it's just the level of hospitality. When I say level, it could be a barbecue, but it is so well done from the way the buffet is set up, the way the guests are provided an environment that they're really, really comfortable. It's not like paper plates and napkins are flying all over the backyard. Even if the food choices are not top tier, the presentation is always top tier.
Yeah.
So you walk into this environment where we're doing a Southern barbecue, and some of these could be international guests. We just feel like we've got their interest the minute they walk in, just the way that we have creatively, displayed the buffet. Every year is different. Every time we do it, it's a completely different experience. And, that keeps your interest level up. The champion last year was Rory. And the year before that, it was Scotty Scheffler, who's from the state of Texas. So then this year, Rory gets to host the champions dinner. Well, nobody knows what's being served at that dinner yet, but he's from Ireland, so you can kind of get creative on what it could possibly be that he's having. So first time ever last year, we created a menu that was kind of Southwestern around the Texas champion. And it went over so well with our customers. Some components from that menu will be put on our regular menus this year because it was so popular.
Well, you also touched on the word experience. And I feel like that was something that we talked about a year and a half ago, whenever it was. It could be a Southern barbecue, but to be well taken care of and have so many details thought through is
Hmm.
what makes you good at your job, right? To be able to provide that experience for someone with something like the Masters, that's an experience. And so to have
Oh,
sort of a continuation of that, and I'd love to
hmm.
talk about that a little bit with you, but like a continuation of that larger experience.
I was talking to a magazine being interviewed for an article. When did you know you were an entrepreneur?
Mm.
And it made me pause for a minute. And all of a sudden, I visualized my dad's old briefcase. When he got a new one, I asked him if I could have the old one. And I would walk around to the trash cans and get the junk mail, or something would come like a catalog, and that went into my briefcase. And I had my desk that I set up like I was a business person. So I love the food and I love to set the table and the flowers and all of that. But honestly, the business part is my passion. In 2019, customers say, well, our driver was supposed to be here 15 minutes ago to pick us up. And I watched that become a problem. I watch these people get frustrated that that is not going smoothly. So what do I do the next year? I do the transportation. You hear somebody say, well, I wish that we had gotten a house that had more outdoor space that was covered because the weather, ended up being really nice and we could have had all of our meals, outside. Well, I didn't rent the house. I didn't have any control over that. I was given the address and I was
Mm-hmm.
just supposed to bring the meal. So now I rent houses too. That's the diversification in and of the golf tournament, being the caterer. Now I am in charge of hospitality overall.
In general, I think too, what makes you such a good entrepreneur is that you acknowledge ingenuity. I mean, even if you're talking about, you were saying, we had like the mail order. A lot of people, one, wouldn't think to reach that big, and two, probably wouldn't have even thought about it as being an option. All of these offshoots that connect so beautifully, you do them well. And I think there is something to be said about that.
I think taking the risk was never scary to me. I brag that I am the champion of the third grade Red Rover. I mean, I was the littlest kid in the third grade, but I won the Red Rover. Red Rover, Red Rover, send Vera right over. Well, let me assure you that I was going to bust through that line on the other side of the football field. It just would have never occurred to me that I'm so short and so little that I'm not going to win. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the people that saw me coming didn't know how strong I was and that I went right through it. And because of that, I tend to consider I can before I say I can't. Even if I'm fooling myself, going out on a limb is not scary to me. And then you have to do the homework. You have to think about the mail order and think about that you've got recipes like for my grandmother's pound cake. It was amazing. There were cakes in a can, but there wasn't that 7 pound pound cake in a can. And so I knew it was dense. I knew it could fit in this size can, that there wouldn't be any movement. Through that, I would mail them to like sorority sisters, family members that lived in other states. And I had a checklist. Did it arrive on time? Was it in good condition? Was it fresh when you sliced it? Blah, blah, blah. Would you please freeze it? Cut it in
Mm-hmm.
half and freeze half of it and pull it out 3 months from now and tell me what you think. I did that for an entire year before the first one, ever shipped out, to a customer. Some people are in such a hurry to get started that they don't do the research to make sure that what you're saying you can do, you can actually do it.
There's something to be said about patience in a very impatient world. We will talk a little bit more very soon about some of the other projects that have stemmed off of your very long, impressive career. But I want to come back to the masters for a minute. I'd love to talk a little bit more about how tradition based it is.
It wasn't this weekend, but weekend before last, there was the golf tournament where everybody's hollering and screaming on the hole and they're throwing stuff. And, it's just that upper crust element of the tradition and if you've never been, but you've been watching it on television for 20 years and you go through Magnolia Lane and you walk out and there you are. I guess it's Disney World for golf. You're the little kid that always dreamed you were going to get to go. And when you finally get to go, it's everything that you thought it was going to be and more.
Mhm.
The changes over time, because I started that here in Augusta in 1984. There's a lot that has changed, as I mentioned, being able to eat out there and that sort of thing. You can't come and go all day long like you used to, 40 years ago. I think now that the experience is so valuable to have the ticket, to be able to come, to be treated to that, by a company of whom you're a vendor, whatever it may be. It's such a grand experience and
Mhm.
all aspects of it are so well done. I mean, you can't even go to the restroom without walking out and thinking that's the cleanest restroom I've ever been in my life. From every stop that you make, whether it's for a cold beer or a pimento cheese sandwich, it's just the hospitality is fantastic. The tournament itself does have that edge of refinement. You want to go to the gift shop and buy a shirt that has that emblem on it because somebody's going to stop you and say, have you actually been there? The minute somebody says that to you, you're going to get this huge smile on your face because you had an amazing experience. You never know what the weather's going to be like, so it could be beautiful every day. You could have a thunderstorm and the golf course closes. But I think people would stay out there in the pouring down rain and lightning striking if they didn't close it because they're just so happy to be there.
Have you been?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been years and years ago, but this part of my business has grown so much that, I'm certainly not out there.
No,
I'm
yeah.
in the guts of the operation.
What was the experience like, and how did it influence how you wanted to add to the hospitality of it all?
I probably haven't been out there since the 80s. One of my clients had some extra tickets on Sunday because their guest, I think it must have been Easter Sunday that year. And some of their guests were leaving and he said, "Why don't you bring your two sons and
No.
y'all can go." I just remember both of my sons play golf and they were young at the time, but just the experience and to already have been in the catering business and having that glimpse of the demographics of the people that are out there and why people come to Augusta. I mean, they're really coming for the tournament. It's not like there's a million other things to do. We do pride ourselves in the growth of our community and the restaurant scene and other things to do while you're in Augusta. But if you're invited to that tournament, that's where you want to be.
It has a very distinct etiquette. What do you think the Masters gets right about tradition that maybe other events miss the mark on?
What did I say a few minutes ago? I said, it could be a Southern barbecue, but if you do it well, and
Mm-hmm.
and everything is delicious, it's memorable. The scene inside the original, clubhouse in the dining area there it's refined. It's very comfortable. It's nothing really fancy. It's so full of tradition. The walls have, pictures of the former champions and the trophy cases with, gorgeous things in there. It speaks to the refinement of the way this tournament is run. The difference in this event, maybe in other similar events, is that our community opens up their homes to these guests. I mean, these aren't Airbnbs. that you're renting for the week that you're going to be there. It's somebody's home. I rent my home, and the experience, and I think probably early on set, maybe in the 80s, everybody in town wasn't renting their house, but pretty much now everybody's renting their house.
On that same experience line, there's a lot of rules associated with the masters, which adds, I think, almost like that. I think we can call part of it hospitality because it's a level of expectation of respectfulness,
Hmm.
which I consider hospitable. But I think it also adds to sort of it being a different experience and that
Correct.
refinement and all of
There's
that.
no cell phones. You can't take pictures out there. You can't be loud. The understanding of as you're walking from one hole to the next, you're keeping your volume at a level that you're just talking to the person that's standing right next to you, not hollering out because you see somebody you haven't seen in 5 years that's on the other side of that hole. These are the things that somehow or another have gone awry just in general. That, you're standing there in the line at the grocery store and somebody's just talking on their cell phone. We, as old-fashioned people, would consider that very rude. Dressing appropriately, playing the part of being there for the reason of watching great golf, being respectful when they're holding up the boards that is like quiet, the man's getting ready to hit his shot. You don't have policing. Everybody understands it.
You know what's so fascinating as you're talking, and it just kind of like something that kind of crossed my mind is it's one of those events where if you do have that shirt, right, it's a great talking point, and I think it's something people are excited to speak to. But what is so interesting is it's if you get the tickets, you are excited to experience it. It's almost one of the only exclusive events where it's not about the Instagram photo. It's not about bragging about it. It's truly you're excited about the exclusivity because you're just excited to be part of it.
Hmm.
And that is
You're
pretty
exactly
darn
right.
rare anymore.
We don't do photography during, one of our customers' events. We're not taking pictures of the people walking up to the buffet and things like that.
You're touching on something that I was going to ask, which was, I love that there's no phones. Do you find that that translates into how people, even though these meals are private, are you finding that that experience is translating into the way people are hosting and interacting that week?
We always have places where somebody can set up and do a little bit of work before
Mhm.
they go to the golf tournament. I mean, generally speaking, Saturday and Sunday are the huge big days, but you're going to have people that are in a house that have a Monday ticket or a Tuesday ticket. So they might want to check their email and get a little bit of work done because a lot of those men take care of some business before they go out to the golf course. We also feel like a lot of times they're going to leave before the actual day is done out there, leave to come back to the house. So we love it when we, have a home that, has a really nice outdoor area where a TV is and maybe a putting green in their backyard that they've, put together, and we can serve some hors d'oeuvres and they're out of the traffic of, waiting until the end. And then we can continue the experience by way of having some traditional appetizers that are being served for that last 5 to 6 o'clock p.m. hour where they've decided to come back and just enjoy it on television.
Television, watching, you're touching on one of my next questions for you, which is that not everyone can be there. And this is something that we talked about in our tailgating conversation, which was this concept of a watch party or how to entertain around in a sporting event. So,
Hmm.
for those who are not familiar with the cuisine that is traditional during the Masters, how could they infuse something at home with some of that same spirit?
Well, absolutely. I've already mentioned the pimento cheese and the chicken salad, and whether it's the recipe that they have at the Augusta National, which none of us have access to, you certainly know pimento cheese is represented at the Augusta National at the tournament. Some of the things that are Southern, like the Vidalia onion, for example, is a huge crop in our state. Pecans, peaches, the things that you think about that you're coming to the state of Georgia, what would I have? So, really capitalizing on, southern Georgia, that sort of thing. Peaches are not in season in April, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't make something like a special drink that has some peach schnapps or a really pretty cheese ball and have a peach marmalade. We're right on the edge of the low country here. We're just a couple of hours away from the coast. So we incorporate shrimp, crab, things that you think about, because you're getting into the low country when you come to our area. We just have proteins that people are expecting. Like they're expecting fried chicken, pork. We have a cowboy pork chop that just melts in your mouth. I mean, it is so juicy, so delicious. And our chefs that we bring in from all over the country, I have signature recipes. The recipes that are in my first book really represent a lot of what we have made over the years during the tournament. And so if it's chicken salad, you got to make it by my book. If it's squash, Parmesan squash, you've got to use the recipe in my book.
Sweet treats, beverages.
So there's, of course, the Arnold Palmer, which is sweet tea and lemonade, and you can have it alcoholic or non-alcoholic. We do a signature cocktail called the azalea because the azalea is the shrubbery that's blooming, that's pretty and pink, at all the holes. So we have that one. We have a Georgia bourbon that last year I had the founder of that company come and several of the accounts let him come for 10 minutes and, describe the process. And then they all got to sample our signature, cocktail that night. So, coming up with some entertainment, during the evening that has to do with the menu, the hospitality part, has gone over really well.
I want to make sure that we're talking a little bit about, you touched on your cookbooks. This is the third in,
Right, right.
right? So could you talk a little bit about the first two, what people could expect, and then how this enhances the collection, if you will?
Okay. In like 2012, I started thinking about my television show that I was able to garner in 2011. I just really enjoyed that new version of myself and what I was doing. And people were saying, well, how are you doing everything that you do? And it really made me stop and think about I had a lot to do. And so I opted to close the retail part of my business. It was a really tough decision, for me because I had been doing that for quite a while. A little bit less than a year out from that decision, I thought, I never gave anybody any of the recipes of any of that stuff that I shipped. Well, now that I'm not going to do that anymore, why don't I share the recipes? And so that book went gangbusters, and it's actually getting ready to be in its seventh print. The second one came out in 2023, and it was to celebrate 40 years of catering. So it's written by season. So the other arm of my business is my cooking camp that I've been doing this summer will be 23 years with the children. So we really got thinking of probably 4 years ago about this book. And I got into the project when I realized that it was going off brand a little bit, that these 6-year-olds learn to set how a proper table. They learn how to fold their napkin. They learn how to hold their silverware. They stand up at the banquet. They're 6 years old and they say their name, where they go to school, what grade they're in, and what they have enjoyed about this camp. And I thought I want it to be more of an educational book, but I want it to be in the same vein of a beautiful book like the other two have been. So, for example, fold the chocolate chips into the whipping cream that you have beaten until stiff peaks form. Well, number one, how long does that take?
Mhm.
Number two, what does fold mean? And number three, what are you incorporating when you make those gestures? And so that's the difference. And the name of this book is Generations. The child can pull it down and make the recipe by themselves, or grandmother can stand with them and say, "Oh, I used to make this when I was little." I'm so excited about it. It's going to complete the trilogy, is what we're calling it. It will then represent that there is a cookbook associated with the three divisions of my company.
How did you decide what recipes go into this one?
We've been doing camp now, like I said, last summer was 22 years. So we've got the tried and true favorites. Like if you're in the 6 and 7 year old class, you're going to make plucket cake and you're going to make breakfast casserole. So that was part of it. And then, I had some childhood favorites. I had some family favorites. My project manager was actually in my very first year of camp in 2004. And she went
Wow.
straight through until she was 14. So she still had all of her recipe books from camp. She knew which ones she wanted to make. In the photography, we included generations in the photography. Like we would have a camper, and her mom and her grandmother came to be in the picture. We did a great job associating different events with the food that you would have for that event, like the birthday party. So it's a beautiful book. And I've used the same photographer for all three books, the same publisher. So there is a vein between all three that link them together. I just think you're going to be successful making the recipes from that book.
Amazing. Now I know this is very much your camp oriented book, but did you feel like you were lean with it being generations? And I know you told me before you're a grandmother,
Right,
your mom. Did
right.
you find that you were also leaning a little bit on your own family history with this?
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. I mean, something is every picture in the book has a representation of something old school and something modern. So that
Okay.
remember that loom that you had that you made the pot holder to give your teacher?
Yeah.
So there's one of those pot holders in one of the pictures. And
Oh,
then, there's the old school lemon juicer, and now it's electric, but the one that you actually take your hand and you
twist your
turn the
hand.
lemon, things like that. And just capturing, the things like a young person learning how to do lattice on a pie. And it's a young man in that picture that has been a camper since he was 6, and he plays sports and does all kinds of stuff, but he likes to cook. And so the environment is very open to the child that loves the crafts more than they love the cooking. The child that loves the taste tests that we do in the education room, that all the different things, and what are you tasting when you taste this, trying to get them to recognize that there's cinnamon in it and there's nutmeg in it, and smelling it and seeing what that's like. So you've got a lot of different things going on. It's called cooking camp, but it's a lot more than just cooking.
Sensory. It's definitely
Yes.
sensory. Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, and I think it's special that you're not only doing that in your camps, but that you're acknowledging that that's part of the overall experience of learning in the kitchen and giving kids the opportunity in this book to explore that a little bit.
hmm When we were moving away from, that real strong children's cookbook is just for a little kid, I thought about the master's degree intern. She was getting a master's degree in dietetics from Augusta University. And so she had 2 days a week that she could have a part-time job. So, she worked with us. And one day I was doing a play setting that we were practicing for a show, and she just kept moving closer and closer to me as I was doing it. And when we finished, I said, "Oh," I said, "you just seem to be so interested in that." And she said, "Well, I hate to tell you, I did not know one thing you were doing." She said,
Oh,
"I had no clue how to do that." And I said, "Well, guess what? You're in the right place because you're going to learn it, and you will never have to be uneasy in a dinner situation again." You really do think about some of that is kind of left the community. I mean, when I think about my
Social,
own
yeah.
children, and every night it's somebody's got soccer practice, you've got, basketball practice over here, and a lot of that's happening when you're supposed to be sitting down to have dinner. I
Right.
mean, so many things have changed. For me, I've just felt like it's something that doesn't cost anything for you to know how to use your silverware, and it speaks volumes
Oh,
to the
yeah.
person on the other side of the table.
Yes. Well, and maybe this goes back to almost the old-fashioned
Hmm.
hospitality that's exhibited through the masters, right? Is that a
Hmm.
lot of those social graces are no longer.
When we reached the 20-year mark with camp, we sent out feedback forms to anyone who had ever had a child in our camping program.
Hmm.
And we said, at the 20-year mark, what could you offer to us for improvement? What could we do to improve the program? And pretty much hands down, it was could they stay longer? They could stay till 3 if we added another curriculum. And so to do that, we also had to secure another place to do that. Well, the house between my cottage that we operate from, there was one house next door. And so I took that house and
Oh,
turned it into
wow.
the home management house. And they learned how to clean a bathroom, make up a bed, fold a fitted sheet, separate the laundry, load the dishwasher,
Wow.
organize the refrigerator. And I'm telling you, the parents love it.
Could we talk a little bit about how people can find this book?
Okay, so you can go to veryvera.com and click on cookbook, and you will see the launch of the new cookbook Generations. The treat to get it in pre-sales, that will be over on May the 1st. But the pre-sale gift is that I will personalize the book at no charge. You'll also be entered to win a $500 gift card to Replacements Limited, where you can get additional pieces of your good china or glassware or flatware. It's just a fabulous. And then we will also, once the book arrives the end of April and we start shipping the live book at the beginning of May, we will have a price on the trilogy that will be, I believe it's a $20 discount of all three books if you get all three. They fit together very well in your cabinet. They're all the exact same size. The first one has a gold spine. The second one has a forest green, and the new one has a lavender spine. So they look really good on your shelf in your kitchen.
This has been wonderful. I'm so excited for you. So congratulations. I know it's also such a passion project, the camps, and to be able to kind of bring it to the world in this way must be really exciting. So I am very excited for you. And I thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Well, you are so welcome. You're always fun to be with.